pastor of the Ferrybank Christian Community Church here. As you'll tell from Yvonne looking across to me a moment ago, I used to be a pharmacist as well. I worked here in Mulligan's in the community in Ferrybank for a number of years too. But today I'm not doing the pharmacy, I'm doing more the spirituality of anxiety and picking up on some of what has already been said. But I'm going to develop that a little bit and particularly talk about the practice of prayer to bring us peace. How can I protect you in this crazy world? It's all right. Yeah, it's all right. Those of you familiar with the Aslan song might be thankful I didn't sing it to you. But they're trying to, Christy Dingham, they're trying to reassure us that things are going to be okay. Or what about this quote? Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid. That's Frederick Buechner. How is that possible, right? How can we live without fear when we know that not only beautiful things but terrifying things happen? Let me expand that quote. He says, here's the world, beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid, I am with you. That's actually the fuller quote. And those words at the end make all the difference. It's said that when we open up the Bible, the scriptures, that there 365 times God says, I am with you. And that sounds neat, doesn't it? It's one for every day of the year. When you actually dig into it, I'm not sure it actually matches that. It's more that phrase is to be found 110 to 120 times. But the idea of God being trustworthy and being safe is there much more. It's there lots of times. It's almost as if God knows we need to be reassured, that it needs to be repeated, that we need to be refreshed in that reality. Because presence makes all the difference when we're anxious. And presence can come to us through prayer. So we've talked a little today already about practices that people look for peace amidst anxiety. So more and more people are pursuing mindfulness. It's found in school settings, even downstairs here in Ferry Fun and preschool settings, through workplaces, by health providers, psychiatrists and psychologists. It gives us well-being in our stress and strain. But mindfulness, what is it? Well, it's that consciousness that we have, that awareness to our present moment, and to acknowledge and accept our feelings, our thoughts, and our physical sensations. And many of the exercises, but not all, when it comes to mindfulness, focus on our breathing, okay? To tune into our bodies. Some of those have been adapted from different religions, maybe Eastern religions like Buddhism have been adapted for secular use. You could even be bold enough to say that this is the secular form of prayer. But I would suggest that many people today are actually looking for a spirituality beyond that. There's a guy who has written about meditation, how it's practiced in Ireland, Thomas Carroll, and he talks about different ways it's practiced, but he calls this the post-secular practice. People, that idea of secular, there's no God out there, people are looking for something more. They've gone beyond that. They want to know the transcendent, as Jana had said before. There's increasing numbers of surveys. It's interesting, isn't it? There's increased anxiety maybe amongst youth, but amongst Generation Z, there's an increased spirituality as well. But it's not just amongst that generation. I was reading a book by Michael Harding, who speaks with a spiritual sensitivity, and he says this, he's over 70 now, he says, I was always seeking that safe place in the world, not quite off the world. The centre of the moving circle, the sanctuary of peace in the troubled earth. That wasn't an unusual quest. It's an adventure humans have been on since we've become conscious, finding peace at the heart of things, finding heaven in the ordinary things. And that's some of that sense that people may even reach for in the middle of meditation. But that idea of mindfulness has a lot of overlap with prayer, doesn't it? Quieting yourself, bringing a focus to your feelings and your thoughts and naming them. A lot of overlap, yet there's distinctive, isn't there? Because you're not actively necessarily giving them over to God. I'm not saying it's bad because of that. I'm just saying that prayer goes further. Prayer speaks to Him. The word meditation, sometimes used, is used in the Buddhist religion more about emptying your mind or removing any worry that way, or any suffering from your life. The same word used by Christians in the Bible is more about filling your mind with truth and turning over that truth. But whether you're guided by apps or you're practicing one form or another, sometimes it's good just to pay attention to what you're listening to. That a little bit like Jana said earlier, curating, what there's much helpful things you could be listening to guide you in that way. But it's good to pay attention to the influences in the content. And as a Christian, sometimes you will feel there are certain types of mindfulness or meditation that are not helpful. But I really believe that prayer and mindfulness can work really well together. But prayer goes further because it brings us to the presence of God, to a peace that isn't just emptying yourself of worry, but actually being filled. So I'm going to bring us to a person who's praying. I could have landed in lots of places in the Bible. I'm just going to land with one person and give him to you, who is the Apostle Paul, who found himself in really difficult circumstances a lot of the time. He was in prison for sharing the message of Jesus with others. And on one of these occasions, he wrote a letter to other Christians in Philippi. And it was a personal letter. It was joyful. It was peaceful, if you like. It was confident. And yet, he was in prison. And he also was uncertain about his future. He didn't know if he was going to live or die. And yet, he still knew peace. Elsewhere, when Paul is writing, he talks about this long list. You have these long lists that Yvonne's shown you today. Well, Paul gave this long list of all the things he'd suffered. And right at the end of the list, he said, and he almost hints this is the most of all, he says, I have the daily pressure of concern for all the churches. Paul knew what it was like to be anxious, but he'd found peace in prayer and he's offering it to others. Others who are coming under pressure actually for their faith and lived in pressured times. And this is what he gives us, just really simply. He says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Now, when he says, do not be anxious, we need to hear him right. He's not scolding you for being anxious. He's offering you and inviting us the ability to do something with our anxiety in every situation. He says to name them in prayer and petition. When we sign a petition, we want something to change. So a petition is to ask God to bring a change. But it's interesting, isn't it? He says to do that with thanksgiving. There's a lot of research I know been done about the power of gratitude, of being grateful, and how positive that is for your mental health. I wonder if in the middle of finding things so uncertain, does naming positive things in your life bring you a sense of groundedness? So Paul says, pray, but praise as well, be thankful. But we bring our anxieties here to God. And then we give them to him, but he gives something to us. And it's a peace that guards our hearts and minds. And the word for guards actually is used of soldiers. Could have been the very soldiers in front of him in prison. It's a strong word. It guards us. There's a nature walk out in Ann Valley. Some of you might know it. There's a little two hands in one place where you put your hands on and you hand your worries over along that path. It's a little fairy path. There's something to be said for knowing your worries and naming them, writing them down, or just doing that. How much more powerful is it for you to talk to someone who cares for you? If you have a friend who will listen to you, who's concerned for you, and who has a presence to give your worries over to them. Well, how much more powerful is it again to do that in God's presence, who can not only listen and care for you, but actually can bring change? From these words, I've developed a little bit of a pattern for prayer, which I'm going to give to you in a moment before we finish up. But I want to just draw your attention to something that I think both Jana and Yvonne have mentioned, and that is that of the idea of what Jana was talking about, healthy spirituality, or a whole view on this. And it's quite interesting actually that what's shown in science and psychology actually matches quite closely to what Paul is saying here in the Bible hundreds of years ago. Because just before these words, he talked about having healthy relationships. He was saying, agree with each other. And just after these words, he was talking about what Jana said, curating what you're taking in. He says, whatever is good and beautiful and true and right, feed yourself on those kind of things. And those things make for our peace as well as prayer. So it's not just prayer is the answer for all. It's just a practice that I offer this morning. But let me offer you two pathways. So when it comes to prayer, I don't know of your experience of prayer, if you're someone who prays, or your background, you might be very free or conversational. Just bring to God how you are. Journal, write down how you are. It can be really helpful. But we can also have prayers that are more patterned or poetic, that put things in place. And the Bible presents us with some of these prayers. And I'm going to give you two examples, because I actually think when you're overthinking, when you're overfeeling, when your heart's overbeating, if you like, to have prayers that help you to pin things down can actually be helpful. And maybe that's be something you can add to your prayer life if you're someone who practices prayer. But this is just following the pathway that Paul gave us. That when you're worried, firstly, name the anxiety. What is making you worried? And then praise. Find something around this to be thankful for. And then pray, maybe ask God to make a change or make a difference. And then receive the peace or wait on him. That can be done by writing it down. Can be done in the middle of the night when you wake up with these worries in your head. But it can be done through being mindful and just focusing on your breathing. So we named finances earlier. Let me give you that example. Not just money is the worry, but be more specific than that. It can just be so unsettling to time and again feel like you're always worrying about money and you just don't have enough. That's the worry named. Praise might be to name some of the ways that God has provided for you, or you can see good things in your life you're grateful for. Prayer might be to ask that he would provide for you and show you steps forward. And then in peace, I like to focus just on breathing and make space for God to just remind you of truth. So if you're someone who has a faith and reads through the scriptures, you might just allow him to remind you of a promise or something in scripture that comes to you. That you may find that helpful. But another one's even more simple, and that's breathing. The idea of breathing prayers. We've talked a lot about breathing this morning, haven't we? About centering ourselves. But the idea of breathing prayers has been practiced by Christians for hundreds of years. So, Lord, have mercy on me, for I am a sinner. Saying, Lord, have mercy on me with the in-breath. I am a sinner with the out-breath. Maybe particularly if you're feeling guilty about something or ashamed, but also just if you need God's mercy because you need help. Another is, Lord, make haste to help. Christ be swift to save. And just repeating that, and it needn't be empty repetition, but actually as you're doing that, and you get into a rhythm of that, your mind might go to different places, different worries. You just bring your mind there as you repeat the phrases. So I like my poetry. All of these are little bits of couplets, aren't they? they're one line and then another line. The Bible's full of those. And so can your life be. You can make your own versions of these yourself. So it could be, I cast my cares on you, for you care for me. But actually, there are some of these work better on the out-breath. So I cast my cares on you feels like it's the first line there, but actually it works better on the out-breath. Because for you care for me, I cast my cares on you. Because when you're breathing out, you can actually do that. Or you could actually say, I'm giving you my, and then name your worry. God grant me peace. I'm giving you my, God grant me peace. So it's just a more structured way of maybe praying, or just a pattern that you might like to use. Prayer can bring us to the presence of God, or make us just more aware of His presence. But it is mainly one side of the conversation. It's mainly us speaking with Him or being with Him. But what's most reassuring is getting to know the one you're praying to. So the other side of that conversation, the Bible is a great place to turn to hear who God is. And it might sound strange to say begin in the middle. But yeah, begin in the middle. If you open your Bible up and plunk in the middle, it's usually the book of Psalms, which is a book of prayers or poems. So if you're new to the Bible, that's a great place to start if you're feeling anxious. God is presented as a refuge. Or start with the second half. We don't often say that as well, don't we? It's usually start at the start in Genesis, but start at the second half where there's the life of Jesus, because getting to know who Jesus is makes a change to our anxiety as well. We might mention some little ways of doing that later today. There's much more I could say, but I won't. It's tea and coffee time. But it is to say this, that this kind of Christmas card-like idea of having peace on earth, this notion, is actually a hope that Christians really do believe in. That not only peace is more than just a feeling that we have inside. Peace will in the end come because all things will be made right. And that actually happens because Jesus was on peace, if you like. Jesus went to the garden before the cross and he sweat drops of blood, which isn't a poetic picture. It's a physical reality of being in absolute distress and anguish. And on the cross, he cried out in agony. He knows what it is to be anxious. But he died to make things well and to make things right. So let me remind you of this. And it's a little bit like where Yvonne ended as well. Sometimes having that sense or feeling of peace internally can actually be beyond us. In those moments as Christians, you can know that you're eternally at peace because of Jesus. Even if your mind is racing, your words are flowing, and there's feelings aplenty, even when the moments when you are distressed, you can know that God holds you behind it. There can be an eternal sense to it. Then positively, I just wanted to leave this little thought with you before I close. We've spoken a lot about anxiety and almost combating anxiety. But imagine the difference you could be by being a non-anxious presence. We can't always be that, I know that, but there are moments when you can bring that peace to other people. Maybe in your work or in your home or your school. There was a guy, Friedman, years ago, wrote a book, Failure of Nerve, about leadership. And he actually said the thing that brought the biggest difference, we love filling our minds with information. But the thing that brought the big difference was being a non-anxious presence. And that's where that term came from. And he actually found studies from big groups of people, but also small groups like families. Sometimes it wasn't even the parents in the family. Sometimes it was the child. It was someone in a group environment who can bring peace, can make a real change. So let me finish with these words, which are at the end of one of Paul's letters. He says, now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times in every way. The Lord be with all of you.